guess we'll start here.
All right.
Actually, good morning, everybody. We're shooting this in the morning. Welcome to episode 7 of the Guitar Gear Locker with my co-host here, Roger Sutherland. And I'm pleased to announce I have my good buddy here, Jeremy Sosville of Sanhedrin. And just welcome to the show. Glad to have you on, Jeremy, finally.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel like we've talked. You've been mentioning for a while, and all those conversations we've had over the years about doing something like this. So I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm honored to be a guest. And I'm glad that the rest of the world can hear what we do backstage before the show starts on tour.
We just nerded about guitars, and amps and 70s and early new wave British heavy metal all day.
Oh yeah, yeah. We
turned everybody to talk on the tour. When me and you would talk.
You all can let us
like just leave the room or just look at us like, what's wrong with these guys? They're talking about
yeah.
So wait a minute. So everybody thinks y'all are like partying and living a rock star life, and you're like nerding out over guitars in between shows.
Yeah, that's
Jeremy. He's drinking and nerding out.
Oh well,
yeah. I usually have a beer in my hand if I've already played. Because the tours we've done, the two bigger tours I did with Black Anvil while Alex was in Immolation on the same bill. We play first, they'd play second, and then the headliner would play. And then usually by the time the headliner's playing, if we're not watching them, we're just in our room, like just talking shit about humbuckers or, all the fine details or like how awesome Van Halen is or whatever else,
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So
good stuff.
Yeah, but definitely not any drugs or chicks or any of that. We're both happily married guys, and we're just with guitars.
Well said.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start off, Jeremy. Kind of wanted to ask you how you got into music, and was there a moment when you decided like, hey, I'm going to be a guitar player?
Well, yeah, I guess I'll answer the first part first, which is just that I grew up in a house where my parents divorced pretty young when I was young, but I always my mom always had MTV on. And when I was a little kid, like 4 or 5 years old, I was super into like all the hair bands, that were being played. And so when she got paid every Friday from her job, she'd come home with like a new Bon Jovi poster, Cinderella tape or something. So that's kind of how I don't have a memory of not being into music, particularly guitar music. And then my dad's a guitar player. So getting into guitar was pretty easy, and it seemed like a really cool thing to do. And then to have it in front of you all the time was helpful. But the very moment, and my dad will reiterate this, where I think I got the bug was I was visiting him on a weekend, and he put his red 80s Charvel on my lap. And then he held the neck and was having me strum while he made the chords. And then I think that was the moment where I was like, this is cool. Like I can take this pick and manipulate something. And then he's like, I could tell by the look on your face at that moment that you were going to be a guitar player. So fast forward to like age 12 or so. Is when I got my first acoustic guitar. And then about a year later, I started really getting into it when I got an electric guitar and started a band as soon as I could play a power chord, basically. And now all these years later, still doing it, still that same 13-year-old kid, wanting to create stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's awesome to have, your dad. Like my father was a presence in music, but he didn't play an instrument, but he was instrumental.
Yeah.
Playing Hendrix and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid,
Yeah, I get one of my earliest memories is like going to my dad's house and him putting Kiss Alive on, Kiss Alive 2. And like giving me those drab green headphones they used to have back in the day. And then and then just like sitting down with the jacket and seeing like Gene Simmons covered in blood and Ace Frehley with that light in the background and just being like, this is the coolest thing you could probably ever do with your life. And
Yeah.
I think aside from like, all the Spinal Tap stuff we deal with on the road, or, with our relationships with our bandmates and stuff, it is the coolest thing you can do. And I'm glad that we can do it,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. I guess we'll get to, wanted to get into first, your latest release with Sanhedrin. And
Yeah.
I think, you're in the studio now, maybe we can get to that later, but
Well, yeah, we're kind of in between two sessions. I got back from recording. We did drums, guitars, and bass down in Woodstock a couple weeks ago, and we're going back down there to do all the vocals and reamp the bass in about a
nice.
week. So yeah, I'm fresh off of the. I was playing guitar for like 9 hours a day for like 4 days straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Trying to take advantage. It's a beautiful studio we were in, so we were just trying to get as much as we could done while we had Neve preamps and an API console and all that stuff. So
Nice. So what as far as Sanhedrin does, what are you using in the studio? I know you're a Gibson Les Paul guy, but besides guitars, what about the amps in the studio?
Well, the first two records, I used the same formula for both because I didn't have all the stuff I've since accumulated, as happens, as you know. So the first two records, I was using my Ampeg VL1002, which is like the Lee Jackson designed, like modded Marshall type of amp that they made in the early 90s. Along with my EVH 5150, and it would just be a blend of those two going through. I think the Ampeg would go through two different cabs that had different speakers. One being an Ampeg cab, and one with G1275s, and then another going through this vintage Sound City cabinet I have, which has like these mystery Celestion speakers that I haven't been able to pin down what they are, but I just know they sound cool. And then the EVH going into some vintage 30s. That was the first two records. So just like that blend of EL34 and 6L6 EQ, that they're different. And when you put them together, they really blossom to make this big sound. The last record, Lights On, I used the Ampeg again. It's like the staple for me. And I combined that with a 100-watt high watt from 1979 with a Friedman BEOD distortion pedal. And it was a blend of those two amps, but it's all EL34 power. And then just this newest record, since the last record, I went from the Friedman distortion pedal to the Friedman amp. So I'm using the BE100 Deluxe with the Ampeg kind of underneath it to give it muscle. And then the Friedman's going into a Sun cabinet that I've had since I graduated high school, that I put some Marshall branded vintage 30s in recently. And then a Marshall cab with the G1265s from like the late 70s, early 80s. And that was the Friedman blend. And then I ran the Ampeg into an Ampeg cabinet, which has 3 G1275s and then a mystery speaker. And when we put the mics up to all the speakers, the mystery speaker won. I have no idea what it is, despite owning this cabinet for like 10 years now.
It's a mystery.
It's always, the cab's always at my rehearsal space. So I've never had like at my home studio here, I can take shit apart and mess around with stuff all, whenever I want. But that cab lives in Brooklyn and I live about 400 miles away now. So I have no idea what the speaker is, but it won. And so that's the story so far. That's
it's
a lot
the
of
mystery sauce.
We're here to be nerds. So.
Yeah. So that Friedman, what are the tubes in that Friedman?
They are Electro Harmonics EL34s.
Okay.
It's like it's the Marshall I always heard in my head, Every time I would play a Marshall, well, for one, they always sound different. You could have like 9 of the same model in a row, and you plug into all of them, and they all have their own thing going on for some reason.
Like cars.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I have 5 Gibson Les Pauls, and every one of them might as well be a different model guitar or sonically to
Oh,
me.
Right.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's basically like everything I always wanted out of a Marshall, but never could get myself. There was always a feel thing for me. It never had the compression that I wanted, and this thing does, and it's just super aggressive sounding. So it's replaced the 5150 because it's got that sponginess to it.
Mhm.
But it puts the guitar in more of a focus sound when you have 2 amps with the same sort of power tube EQ curve, I find. And that's just the vibe I'm
Mhm.
going for now, is just that classic mid-rangey, in your face, kind of vocal sounding amp, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know you me and you have a lot of similarities where, you know, our roots really are like in heavy rock and
Mhm.
new wave British metal and stuff, but there's the other side to us, which is the extreme metal
Yeah.
side. And for instance, in your past work with Black Anvil, do you tend to gravitate towards different guitars or different amps? Whether when you're playing that type of music compared to playing,
Oh, yeah.
hard rock stuff.
Well, I mean, the guitars in Black Anvil, everything I've recorded with them, I've used my Les Paul Custom or the Black Les Paul Studio that
Hmm.
I've spent. I mean, I have them both here actually. So,
Well, wait
Nice.
a minute. This is episode 7. It'll be the first episode where we don't bag on Gibson.
well, you better not.
None of that.
No, I say it. I'm a realist, but I like Gibson, but I'm a
He's
realist.
got Roger's got a killer Les Paul custom though.
I have a
Yeah.
2005 R0 I love.
Okay. This is a 2005. I bought it brand new in 2006. So
Oh,
this is my
yeah.
number one desert island. If any other,
Beautiful.
this is the last guitar I'll get rid of from my cold dead hands.
There
So
you
I
go.
use, but it's got a hotter pickup, so that works pretty well. So with Black Anvil stuff, it's to me the guitars don't change as much as the amp and the gain structure. So with the Black Anvil records, the first one I did, I was using the Ampeg, but we had Gary in the band for that record still, and he had the Randall head and the Invader pickup, and he had like a super, cutting, biting, aggressive sound. So me being a little warmer underneath was good. But when he
Right.
left the band, that's when I got the 5150 because I wanted to kind of fill in some of the gaps that were left behind by him leaving the band.
Mm.
So with that band, I've always used the 5150 live and in the studio as kind of the main amp, and then I'll tuck something underneath it, usually the Ampeg. On the last record, it was the 5150 and the Ampeg, and then when I left, Colin, the engineer, reamped everything into one of those solid state Ampegs that all the death metal guys like.
Mhm.
Uh, and so it kind of created this extra sizzle to it. Yeah.
Look at Alex. He's like, nope.
I mean, okay, not all the death metal guys. Many of the death metal, not the ones from Philly, but the ones from New York.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how did I don't know if I ever, I mean, probably some of these questions answers I know, but I don't know if I ever asked you how Sanhedrin came about. How did the formation of that band, and was there an idea originally, like a vision that you had with the other members, create this band?
Well, me and Nate, the drummer, go way back. We realized the other day we've been playing together in some form or another for like 18 years now. He was
Wow.
one of the first musicians I kind of grew a kinship with when I first moved to New York City in like 2004 or 5. And we had a band together, like just a rock band. And then we were doing like cover band nights once a month at this club called the Delancey. And then we were
Mhm.
just jamming. He worked at a backline rental studio in Queens. And so that was a lot of fun for a guitar player because every time I rolled in there, I'd be like, which of these amps do I want to play today? So that was a great education for me to learn what all the different amps were about. But we would just be jamming and having friends come in and trying different stuff. And at one point, about 10 years ago, he was like, I want to bring my friend Erica in. She sings and she plays bass. She used to tour a lot. She used to live in San Francisco, but she's from Brooklyn. And we brought her in and we started writing some songs where it was less project sounding and it had more of like a cohesion than anything Nate and I had been doing before. And Erica, if anybody has heard the band, knows that she's a fantastic singer.
Oh yeah.
And I really enjoy writing vocal harmonies and big chorus stuff. And so the two of us, I don't have like a lead singer's voice per se, but I enjoy backing up a great melody with a harmonized vocal.
You all
And that's
sound great
something.
together.
Oh, thanks so
You're
much.
the Michael Anthony of the band. So
Yeah,
you're playing-
basically.
Yeah.
Like when you hear him on a record, you're like, man, he sounds so good, but you wouldn't necessarily want him to be singing Ain't Talking About Love.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. But it blends well.
Yeah, that's kind of my role there, but it was something we came into very early on. Like the first song or two that we wrote was just like, let's take advantage of this. And then it just sort of happened slowly over the next year. We wrote a bunch of songs, decided to make a record. We tried shopping it around and we got politely declined by everybody. So we said, screw it, we'll put it out ourselves. So that's what we did. And then thanks to the power of the internet and places like Bandcamp, we got some traction over in Europe, in Germany. Like one day we're just like, why the hell are all these people from Germany ordering this record? It wasn't a complaint, but it was just like, this is interesting. Then we find out that we were featured in Def Forever magazine, which is a big, hard rock, heavy metal print magazine in Germany, unbeknownst to us.
Right.
And then we got invited to a festival, and then they're like, the guy running the festival's like, you should meet this guy. He runs this label in Italy. And we're like, yeah, cool. And then one thing just leads to another. And this band that starts out as a project between friends has turned into something that occasionally gets us on airplanes to go to Europe or to, get in a van to play across America. And it's been a wild ride. We take none of it for granted though, because I was already in Black Anvil by then. So I was already touring and kind of getting that itch scratched. And this was just something we were doing because we loved it. There was no, let's start a traditional metal band sort of a vibe. It's just, this is what we come up with when it's the three of us together.
It's natural,
Yeah.
How much have the two of you seen the music industry change from like the old days or 10, 20 years ago? And then, nowadays it's more dominant to have music on the internet. How much have y'all seen it change from like it? You just kind of, and I guess I'm kind of asking this for like the local guys that are trying to do their own thing and get recognized and get out there. They put it on Spotify and things like that. How much have you two seen that kind of stuff change?
I mean,
Well,
Alex has been at it a little longer than me, so he could probably speak more to like the tape trading era and stuff. I came up a little later than that, but
yeah. Well, I would say as far as the music industry, I mean, it used to be where you would sign to a record label and you would, have some time to grow. There would be a process there and a vision to get the band to grow. Okay, this record we're going to do this. Next record we're going to get to this point, and you had you would have some kind of backing with the label. So now, because of the internet, the record sales are. I mean, they're doing better actually as of recently. Like I know vinyl's picked up a lot, but
vinyl outsells CDs
now. It's like reverse effect, and I'm sure you agree with this, Jeremy. It's where the album is promotion for the tour,
right?
So the tour is like the big thing, and it used to be before where the tour was, to promote the album.
Right.
Now
yeah,
so.
like I started my first. I've started my first band in like the mid '90s.
Yeah.
And so there was email by then, but it was pretty new. So it wasn't quite as, the same as pen paling and stuff like that, was going on in the '80s. But I think the big difference is selling records was a revenue stream for artists, and now it's
Right.
not.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
in the case of putting out a new record now, I mean, I encourage every band, even bands in my hometown here that are like, they all work full-time jobs and the band is just their passion. I'm like, get on Bandcamp. You just never know. Because Sanhedrin, that's what happened. We just put the stuff on Bandcamp,
Right.
and
Yeah.
out of nowhere, now we're on Metal Blade Records. Like, what?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
And
cool.
that I guess that's what made me think of that is that you said you kind of shopped it around with the record labels and didn't get any traction. And
Yeah,
then I guess nowadays the difference is with the internet. I mean, you could get it out in places like that and get
yeah.
exposure.
And labels now they are more likely to sign you or even entertain a conversation with you once you've proven how much of the work you are willing to do yourself in the first place.
Right.
So I think with Sanhedrin, that helped us a lot with uh, Metal Blade and the label before that, Cruz del Sur, in just showing like, well, we believe in this and we're putting it
Right.
out there. And then by the way, apparently, there's a contingent of people who think this is of high quality. And
Right.
then that's when people come around, and because these most labels, aside from, the larger ones that Alex and I are lucky enough to be a part of now, most labels are like one or two people. It's a passion project, and they are investing their personal money into you, and they're not going to
Mhm.
do that with, their risk profile is different than a larger company. So they're just going to,
Right.
if you
Yeah.
prove, you know, if you prove that you're willing to put in the work, you're doing the touring, you're putting up your own money to put the record out yourself and stuff like
Right.
that, that's going to help you in the long run when it comes
Right.
to, if you want to scale up and you need a label, because labels are valuable
Right.
in terms of the things they can offer a band too.
I
But
guess if they're gonna invest, they wanna make sure you have some skin in the game, right?
yeah, yeah. And if you prove, they want you to prove that you're not. I think Sanhedrin got rejected initially because who the hell were we? We were just another
Right.
band that hadn't really played any shows. We had a 4-song demo that my friend Travis recorded for us in his rehearsal space, and that was that. And ironically, one of the labels that sent us a very polite letter was Metal Blade, which I keep in my email in a special folder just to like, have a chuckle once in a while. Because again, like what are they going to do? Who are we from anybody else? But then we pressed 300 copies of this record ourselves, and I'm the one mailing them out to people when the record gets released, and then that you as an artist have to have the gusto. You don't have to prove it. Be
Right.
you, and if that's who you are, people are going to notice. I think to some extent.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And it's the work you put into it. It's
Yeah,
it depends on what you're shooting for, I guess. Whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you want to bring your band out to the next, keep climbing the next level, then you just got to put a lot of work into it.
yeah,
And it's okay if you want to just be a weekend warrior guy too, and put out a
Right.
release once in a while, and play a festival or a show here and there. But
Well,
I
and
was
I'm sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, 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 no. Go ahead.
No, I was so when Alex and I were talking about, developing this channel, I deal with a lot of local bands. And when I say local, I don't care where you are, you have local bands around.
Yes.
And a lot of guys, when they heard us talking about doing this, they're interested in hearing how you guys get started and in the business side of it. And you know what, because they're looking to do the same thing. Some just want to play covers, but some want to do originals.
But all that stuff requires a certain angle or business acumen,
Right.
and you don't have to be like a hyper capitalist hedge fund type person, CEO type, to make a band make a
Yeah.
little money. You just have to. There's a million ways where you can generate a business plan that's unique to your scenario.
Right.
And I think the challenge is just finding those lanes.
Yeah.
Just kind of the ability to read the world around you and find out how you can take advantage of the rules or bend the rules, or
Right.
will the world to your favor.
Right.
But yeah, I'm happy to talk about that stuff with anybody, whoever asks me. It's interesting
Right.
to become 40 years old and be that guy now, whereas like 10, 20 years ago, it was me asking all the questions I could about gear and, you're on tour in Europe. What's that like? How does that happen? And all those questions. What do you do when you get there? And now I'm like the one doling out the advice, not the advice so much. I don't like to give advice so much as just say, this is what we did. This is how and why it worked. Here's what didn't work. And take that information wherever you want to take it,
Yeah. Use what works for you and don't use what doesn't work for you.
Exactly.
It's all good information though.
Yeah. And if you're going to do it for the love of it, don't have any crazy expectations, because once you do that, you're setting up sometimes, be confident, but
nobody's gonna. The idea that we get to write music with our friends and then people will come pay money to see that happen is not a given. So if you're doing something, do it because you believe in it, because that's what people are going to connect to anyway, is the authenticity.
Right.
And then just sort of have gratitude for what comes to you from that versus, expecting anything other than, for me, my favorite part about all this is, just the camaraderie, all the cool people you meet along the way with it, whether it's industry people who help you out or other bands. Alex and I have gone across America a couple times together now, see each other every day. And now we're here on this podcast and, we have a real bond just from that. And
Absolutely.
those are the things that when, in your dying days, when you're reflecting on, you're not going to be like, I wish I made more money playing guitar. It's going to be like, I'm so thankful that I got to meet all these people and experience all these things and play these venues and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
I didn't mean to get us off a track, but like I said, we could talk about. Well, we're going to talk about guitars, but there's guys that like to hear about the band side too, and that's what this is all about. Just being like an insider on the conversations,
Yeah. That's why we. I imagine you guys started this channel and this show because of the things that you liked about other shows, and you felt you could
absolutely. We're passionate about it, and we like to talk to like-minded people like yourself.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
And a lot of people that want to hear these stories. There's a lot of probably young kids out there that kind of want to know the inside scoop on how everything came about, but I guess let's get to the cool stuff, the guitars.
Guitars are cool.
It's funny. I got to ask you about this because I was mentioning this to Roger earlier. I saw you got a Jackson Rhodes, which is completely like the opposite of usually the style guitar you play. So I'm just curious,
well, that's a
chord and
that's a great story because unlike a lot of fellas, I married somebody who thinks guitars are pretty cool, and I don't have to hide anything. And in fact, there's been a moment or two where I own a guitar because she poked me into getting it, and this is the case. So I've been a huge Randy Rhoads fan ever since I can remember, and hence the white Les Paul I showed you. I could have gotten the black one, but I got a white one, So I was on Instagram a couple months back, and there's this store down in Syracuse, which is a 3-hour drive for me. And it had a USA Rhodes at a price that made me go to bed that night thinking a lot about. So I called them the next morning right as they opened, and I was like, is that guitar spoken for yet? And they're like, no. They're like, there's some guy named Josh coming down later to check it out. And I was like, well, call Josh and tell him to stay home. And I gave him my credit card number. And then I drove 3 hours to pick up the guitar and then bring it back another 3 hours. So it's a 6-hour round trip, only to find out that the guitar needed a lot of work. So nothing crazy, nothing I couldn't do. So it needed I'd never seen this before. On the Floyd, the bridge saddles were fused, so the fine tuners didn't move the hinge. It's not tuning, You're turning the thing, nothing's happening. So I had to get new fine tuners, new saddles. I bought a trem stopper for the back, so it's dive only. You can't go this
Yeah.
way so that when you're making string. So I put that in. So drilling into a USA Jackson was something I literally got sweaty palms doing, but I did it. And then I got a new Floyd nut for it, and then I put a new pickup in it because it came with a Duncan Invader, and those things are just a little too much for me. So I
Mhm.
put a Duncan Custom 5, which is an Alnico 5, like 14K-ish output. And in
Mhm.
fact, I recently released a YouTube video showing it off on my channel. So I'll plug
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'm surprised at how quickly I took to the feel of it. And being a Les Paul dude and more into classic stuff like Strats and Tellys and the like. And it is all over the new record. It's got like just the way it blends with some of my other guitars as like the doubled rhythm guitar left and right.
Right.
It's just
Mhm.
got some articulation and aggression that a Les Paul just doesn't have, particularly like in that sort of middle register of the guitar, like on the
Mhm.
the fifth, seventh fret kind of chords and up there. There's just like this
Mhm.
tap to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's yeah. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, but I thought of you when I got it because of like now I'm in the Pointy Guitar Club, like Alex. Got all those D's back there. I could see them.
Welcome to the club. Yeah. But I'm a classic shape guy too. So,
Oh, I know.
you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
So
Oh, yeah.
you got to have them all. You know?
yeah. Well, yes and no. I had more. I've gotten rid of some because now I'm at a point where I'm just like, I do have guitars that I don't play for like a year or two, but they still, when I need them, they're there. Like I have a Telly that
Yeah.
I've recorded with a few times, and but yeah, I've kind of downsized. I'm down to like 11 electric guitars right now, but
Hmm.
downsizing guitars meant upsizing amps. So I don't know. I somehow own 5 4x12 speaker cabinets, and I don't even
Yeah.
know. I have
Wow.
4
Well,
here.
if you're going to have a bunch of guitars, I think they have to be used.
Oh, yeah.
I saw an interview with Alex Skomick, and he said something like, at the time of the interview, he only owned like, you would think somebody like him owned more, and I think he said something like he owned like 30 guitars of that.
Yeah, for a
And
guy like
he
you.
was like, he's like, I got rid of a lot of stuff because I didn't use them. He's like, don't have it if you're not going to use it.
Exactly.
Um,
Like, I
so
have 5 Les Pauls, but that's because I was in 2 bands with 2 different tunings, so you have your main and
yeah,
your backup for both, different string gauges. And then I got my 5th one was a birthday present that Alex was there for. So
I
what am I gonna
there.
do? What are you gonna do when somebody hands you a 56 gold top reissue with P90s on your 40th birthday? You're gonna say, "Oh, no, I have too many. Take it back."
Well,
It's funny because it was Irving Plaza,
Yeah.
and I saw the guitar before he did. His wife, we're upstairs in the dressing room, and she showed me the guitar, and I was like, "Oh my god, he's gonna lose his shit."
yeah.
And
I still lose it every time I play it.
Oh, my
have
God.
you recorded with that guitar? And maybe you could talk about that
Oh,
guitar
yeah.
to see,
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the fellows in Immolation for unknowingly booking me the greatest 40th birthday party I could have ever imagined. So the backstory to that is
Irving Plaza, 1,000 people as
yeah,
guests.
no big deal. Black Anvil got invited to play like the last leg of a headlining tour they were doing, and the tour ended at Irving Plaza. And that
Yeah.
show was a special one because it was like all these different generations of New York bands kind of all playing, from like newer band like Funeral Leech, Black Anvil,
Mm.
Demolition Hammer,
Yeah.
Mortician, Immolation.
So,
And
yeah.
so I'm like, oh, that's my 40th birthday. That's gonna rock. I was like already psyched. I'm like, I get to play Irving Plaza on my 40th birthday, and I get to, Demolition Hammer is one of my favorite bands, and I get to see them, and they were awesome. They were super cool too. And
Yeah.
and then yeah, I get off stage and I'm getting out of my gross stage clothes into something a little more proper. And my wife texts And she's like, I'm upstairs because Irving Plaza has like the side stage dressing area, but then upstairs is like a bigger area. So I go upstairs and I see her just sitting next to the couch with this obviously vintage style Gibson case because I know the reissue cases because I have a
Yeah.
59 reissue that she made me buy the first time I ever took her to a guitar store, and that's a story into itself. But I like this girl. So she's there with a guitar case, and I'm like, "What the hell is that?" I'm like, I know what could that be? Because I'm like, I have a 59. What the hell else do I need? Like for a vintage reissue? And I open it up and it's that, and then inside is a card, like a birthday card with like 20 members of my family and friends that I've made through the years that all contributed to it through a conspiracy that my drummer and good friend Nate, drummer of Sanhedrin, put together as just a special thing. Every time I open up the case, I smile. It's like
Yeah.
I have other guitars that I play more, but like that's my favorite guitar because when I open up the
Yeah.
case and put it in my hands, all I can think about is like how cool of a set of circumstances led me to that moment where I have that guitar. So
Mhm.
yeah.
What do I say? A cool guitar with a cool story, man. You can't get any
Yeah.
better.
Well, most of mine, I like a guitar with a story. A lot
Yeah.
of mine have those. The ones that it's funny, the ones that I've ordered off of the internet and just gotten mailed to me, I don't even think I have any of those
Right.
anymore.
And
Right.
it's
Right.
funny because me and him were having this discussion about P90 pickups and how much we like P90s. And
Oh, yeah.
it's funny, it's like that day, like when his wife
Oh,
showed
yeah.
me the guitar, the P90s, I was like, you're never gonna. Me and him were just nerding out about P90s,
Yeah.
and there you
Dude, it
go,
was wild
P90.
because a year before that, my drummer and friend, Nate, who orchestrated the whole conspiracy, was like, well, he was just joking. He's like, you have all these, you got the 59 reissue now, you have the custom, you have those studios. Like, is there any Les Paul that you would even want at this point? And I'm like, well, something with P90s would be cool. And then he pulls up his phone. He's like, what, like a junior? I'm like, nah, I think like a gold top, but those are kind of crazy, And then
Yeah.
he pulls up a picture on his phone. He's like, one of these? I'm like, that's the one. Yeah, that's what I'd get if I had, however much money it costs to get one, which is a lot.
Yeah,
A lot to justify
yeah.
for a guitar that you're not going to play every day, I guess.
Right.
And a year later, there it was. And then he's like, remember when I did that? I was like, yeah, you mother. So,
How
yeah.
do you like
So
the P90s?
I love them. They're all over the new record too. They just
Nice.
have like a cut and a tightness about them, but they still, unlike a Strat single coil, there's still some low end muscle to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, on the newest record that we're working on now, there's a song that's like drop D, and it's kind of a plodding, slower, heavy song. And the two guitars, I would have thought that like the Jackson or the custom that have the hotter pickups would have been the heavier sounding guitars. But I wound up using the 56 reissue and the 59 reissue. And they just have the
Yeah.
right amount of everything in that particular key. I mean, I
Yeah.
went nuts in pre-production with this record, picking out what guitars were going to be in what songs. And I could go through that process too, but
Yeah.
I'm a crazy person. So, but yeah,
Nice.
those are the guitars that won. But yeah, P90s are awesome. I play that guitar on the bridge pickup, and I'll just be like trying to pretend I'm George Thorogood or something, or just
Yeah.
try to. And then some of that like ZZ Top like hybrid picking kind
Yeah.
of stuff is really fun to do on there.
And they
Yeah.
got to growl. They got to growl those
Yeah.
pickups.
Yeah,
They
they're
don't
just
get out
mean.
anything out.
And when the pick hits the strings, it's just got this like clank to it, where you're
Yeah.
like, yeah. But again, like it still rocks. And on that guitar in particular, even though it's got the baseball bat neck and stuff, like I can
Mhm.
fly around on it and the notes just pop out. I did a
Yeah.
couple solos on the new record with it because obviously it's going to cut through the mix, but I use it a lot on some rhythm tracks too, because it's just, I mean, it's a little noisy. You got to find the spot in the studio where you're like,
Yeah.
Sure.
like the where the hum
Single
is
coil.
funny,
Yeah. Yeah.
but these are good
When I
problems.
think of the P90, I always I hear Leslie West. And
Oh
it's just like the
Yeah.
first person in mind, it's like, when I
Gravel.
think of a P90 pickup, I hear that sound that he
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other guys probably, I'm sure, Jeremy, you
Yeah.
inspired as well. And
His,
kind of
his
chase that sound. How did he get that sound back then?
Yeah, well, that and that weird Sun amp he was using, and just
Oh, that's what he was using, son, huh?
using a Sun
Son.
Coliseum PA, and I watched a video on YouTube recently, much like the people watching us right now, and apparently that amp was the only master volume kind of amp of the day because it was a PA head. So you had your 4 mic inputs, 1/4 inch, and the mic you goose the mic preamp all the way up, and then there was a master volume to the right, so you could get that distortion and then turn it up back in
Huh.
like the late 60s. But I mean, I would say 80% of how good that sounds is the fact that Leslie West is the one gripping that guitar and just making it do whatever he
Yeah.
says.
Yeah.
Sure.
Those mountain records are awesome because it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
you just hear a man gripping the hell out of a neck and just being like, I'm going to control you and you're going to do what I want. And it's going to always be on the verge of falling apart, like feedbacks sonically, whatever, but
Yeah.
holds it together. That's the real challenge when you play these big ass amps.
Yeah, I think that's the number one thing for guitarists. Everybody talks about gear and stuff like that, which definitely helps, because that's our tools to, to get across whatever we're trying to get across. But the main thing, the main ingredient is the hands. It's in the hands, and it's how you playing the instrument.
It's the relationship between your ears and your hands, and trying, because we all have a sound in our head. And it's like you're using your hands to manipulate the guitar to put out to the amp a certain way. And then you have a certain kind of amp or a certain kind of setting on the amp. And now I've gotten recently into speakers. And I mean, you want to talk about rabbit holes, man. Like I thought pickups, guitars, the whole nine. And then I'm like, wait, the speaker's what the sound comes out of. Of course it's important. I've watched many shootout videos and I mean, it's the reason why I put different speakers in one of my Sun cabinets, because I was just like, everything I own has these G1275s, which I like. Some people hate them, but whatever.
Yeah, and how you mic the cab and all these different easy things.
And
I got a funny story real quick for you, Jeremy. I don't know if you might know about this. So, so years ago I was on tour with Morbid Angel, and their guitar tech, I became friendly with Trey's guitar tech, and Trey had this crazy combination on his cabinet where there was 2 mics on the, you may know about this, right? And it had like a bubble bulb around the one mic or whatever. And I was just like, for a couple of days, I'm just like, what the fuck does that do? Like, what's going on here? And I said, what is this about? And he's like, well, Trey was on acid in the studio, and he came up with this idea to make it sound like, whatever. And it seems to work for whatever reason. And it just he's been doing it for years now.
I love it because that guy is one of the most esoteric people, as far as I can tell. I've never actually met him, but just knowing him through his music and watching him live, looking at his live rig. Last time I saw him, he had a big box fan in front of one of his 412s. And
that too. Yeah.
I feel like maybe there was a microphone involved with that, because maybe he wanted the box fan to be affecting what the mic was picking.
He had the fan.
Oh,
sure.
Fan going in. So I think when he would do solos on certain songs,
he would pick that side.
He would pick that sound with the fan for like maybe like Langy kind of thing. I don't know.
Again, just an esoteric dude, but man,
wow.
Some of my favorite guitar solos I've ever heard are ones that he composed. So he can do whatever he wants. And he does.
That's cool to at least see somebody still being kind of creative. And
Yeah.
I don't know if it
Yeah,
does anything, but I didn't really hear the difference.
yeah. I find there's like the online thing is like a double-edged sword because you get these consensuses over time where everybody's on the forum saying this speaker is the best speaker. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. This is the best pickup, and this is, and then I think if people just read what other people are saying versus going out and experimenting on your own and just trying weird stuff,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
like
That's
just
the excitement,
yeah,
too, I
like
think.
a guy like me should be playing a 5150 through a Mesa cabinet because I'm a high gain dude and all that. I've never, the last Marshall I owned was a Valve State 100 in like 1999 because that was the best amp I could afford. I don't own any Marshalls, despite the fact that I sound like I probably play them when you hear my records. Uh, the Sun cabinets instead of the Marshall cabinets because they have a different construction and they just add something. I a lot of that comes from financial limitations early on in my life that also
Mhm.
become part of the sound that I've been sculpting. And now you get to a point where like, okay, I could trade this stuff in and get the Mesa cabinet or the this or
Right.
that, but I'm
Yeah.
not gonna because this is the sound that I've developed for me and this is what I want now.
That works. Yeah, that works for
Yeah.
you. There's no right
Yeah.
or wrong. It's funny also, I thought about you, a couple months ago. I was on tour with, Cattle Decapitation, and,
Yeah.
Josh, who we eventually gonna have on the show, the, guitar player. Josh plays, high watt,
Oh yeah.
and you and him are, like, the only, like, metal guys that that I know
Yeah.
or heavy players that use high watt amps, and he's endorsed by high watt too. And he's got a really interesting tone.
Yeah.
What he's going on, but where I'm getting at is there's no right or wrong in anything. It's what works for you and what
Yeah.
helps
I mean,
you get across whatever you're trying to get across musically.
I
And
have a deep affection for high watts. It's the first real guitar amp I ever played. My dad has a 50 watter from like the original era. And when I started my first band, he just like let me borrow it for 3 years. And I was
yeah,
like, so that's also how I developed my touch because I was trying to get a distorted, loud punk rock guitar sound out of this amp that even if you max out the gain on it, isn't that. So you have to
yeah,
hammer the guitar in a certain way to get more out of it to hit that
yeah,
front end.
yeah.
But yeah, so I have a 100 water, and I they're just they're a really unique thing, and I would like to hear that now that you say that because I've messed with some high gain stuff with humbuckers with mine. I find that I like my high watt with like single coils and like some drive pedals more so. Uh,
Hmm.
but that's also because, mine is of whatever year and it's going into whatever speakers and the whole soup creates the tone. It's not just one thing, but that's cool. I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I remember seeing his rig, and I was just like, wow, that is fucking cool. And I know that you would use high watt in the studio and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah. The last
And
three
it's like,
Sanhedrins
Yeah.
have for
I
different
like this.
reasons.
Yeah, for me, like you're saying, like clean stuff. It's like how I got into high watt was because I was such a Dave Gilmour fan.
Oh yeah.
And I knew it, and Pete Townsend used them as well. And yeah, so but I think that's cool, and like I said, in the end of the day, it's all about what works for you, and there's no right or wrong in anything. Oh, this is the best or that's the best.
Yeah.
Well, it's the
No,
best for
it's, don't tell me
you,
how to
just like
get out of my
guys,
head.
I think it's really interesting. Sometimes, like somebody will say, and you just did. Somebody will say something that really gets me thinking. Like, you said early on, you kind of got what you can afford, and that develops your sound. And now you can
Yeah,
afford to go out and buy all these bells and whistles, but it may not sound like you anymore, right?
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I'm finding that as I've grown older, I like the gain knob keeps getting turned down a notch as the years go by.
yeah, me too,
Right.
me too.
I
The
just,
game just keeps getting less and less and less,
and you know
and
what? The sound keeps getting bigger and bigger when I do that. So
yes,
Right.
it's
absolutely.
funny
That's
how
the
that
thing, and the clarity too. And that's another
Yeah.
thing for me. It's just about, the clarity, and getting that across, and making sure that comes across properly sonically.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're not going to spend all this time in your life practicing as a musician and setting aside all the other commitments you have in your life just to go out there on stage and not sound good, and not be heard.
Yeah.
Best
Yeah.
way to be heard is turn the gain down just a little bit not for
Yeah.
everybody. I
Right.
don't
Yeah,
know
the
about
game.
Bob Barrett and Eric Rutan turning their gain down because they got a thing going, but like,
Yeah.
Oh, well, they got that, and I don't, I think that was the last tour I did with you, Jeremy. It was
yeah,
Accountable Court, and
uh-huh.
I asked, I don't know if I asked Eric or Rob, I can't remember because I'm not, I've never been a big boogie fan. I do like boogie amps, but like
We talked about that,
rectifiers have never been my thing, and so they just had, their guitar tone is just
Oh my
insane,
god, the
So
best.
it was Rob actually. Rob told me the whole deal, and then I was like, "What the hell?" Like, because I said, anytime I use a rectifier, it never sounds that way. The way you guys got them sounding. And I don't like them. He goes, I don't even particularly like them either. He's like, well, without it, because they're so dry. He goes,
Yeah.
we're using it's the Maxim.
Yeah, I saw
Like
that.
it's a tube driver kind of.
Yeah,
Like,
I guess it's similar to a tube screamer, but much
yeah,
more
tube
powerful, more headroom and stuff, and probably
yeah,
some.
yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too
So
because I was always
that's what it is. That's what's making it sound the way it
right.
does.
Well, I've
Yeah.
experimented with that kind of stuff too. Just like I become, as I approach my middle age here, I've become a frequent shopper of overdrive pedals, and
Yeah.
and so like I got a whole pedal board that's just drive pedals, and like I just experiment with different stuff and see how they hit amps, and you'll come across stuff that surprises you, and you're just like, oh, okay. So I wonder with them if it was even just an accident where they're like, here, try this. Oh crap.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I'm with you with the
A weird combination of things that the magic happens sometimes.
exactly. Yeah, and again, like you just stumble across it. Now, if you give me or you Rob Barrett's guitar and plug into his rig, we're not going to sound
Oh
like
no,
Yeah.
fuck no.
he's got his own right hand. He's got a special right hand. The way he picks
Oh, totally.
and like
Or vice
the way-
versa.
yeah,
If he plugs into one of our rigs, he's gonna sound like him. It's not gonna sound like us.
exactly because he digs a certain way, and then Rutan, same thing. He's got a certain attack
Yeah,
with his picking hand where you're just like, oh man, like I admire them both a lot, and it was a real privilege to be able to just like
Both of
stand on
them
the
are-
side of the stage every night watching those dudes do their business. Like, and again, that's what this stuff's all about. I didn't, we didn't come up with $1 million from that tour, but I'll never forget the time that I was in a band opening for Cannibal Corpse, and I tried my best to take advantage of everything I wanted to get out of that.
Well, and I can tell you, we saw y'all at the Fillmore. It was a great concert with all of you guys.
Nice. Well, thank you.
Except for
What's that?
that might have been like, it's funny because Rod's like, oh, you guys are great that night. And I was like, that might be like the worst show.
Oh my God.
It's always like
Actually,
that.
and Bob, both of us had like horrible night. Like Bob was like, oh, it was one of the worst shows I ever played. And I was like, yeah,
You
me
know
too.
what? I'm sure your ears on the stage, it may have sounded different. It sounded phenomenal. All the band sounded phenomenal that night. And as soon as we saw Alex out in the street, he started bitching.
Oh, dude,
nonstop
I've been
about
there.
how-
Alex. I've been there. You get off stage and you're like, everything about my rig sounded weird, and my hands felt weird. I just like had everything was like a labor. And then you get off stage, you go to a merch table, and somebody's like, "I've seen you 4 times. That's the best you guys have ever been." And I'm like,
You're just like, what the fuck are you listening to?
Yeah, and he
But
had it
they're not
on his
wrong.
face the entire show. It was on his face. He kept looking over his rig like, "The hell's going on?" And I'm like, "What's going
I
on?"
love that shit. You plug your
There was
amp in,
multiple
it sounds
issues
nothing
for
like
us.
it. Wonderful.
And Cannibal, I found that later too. Even like
Oh, yeah?
Alex Webster, he was just like, oh man, tonight for me this is bad.
Yep. Well, the nice thing about touring is until the last night of the tour, you always have, well, tomorrow maybe will be better.
Yeah. We'll get it right by the last show, I think.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it takes that long. You're like, oh man, like how many tours have you done where like the last show you're like,
We're fucking good tonight, man.
yeah, like the last show, like, I feel like we're just starting to find the pocket, you know, and then you're like, well, I'll see you in 3 months.
You know, it's funny. Some of the things that we complain about, I think you just gotta try to not think about that stuff sometimes. Like even like I had a conversation with Danny from Autopsy when I saw those guys last, and Danny was just asking me about my show, and I was just like, fucking monitors, and he's just like, man, I don't even care anymore. I just go out there, have fun, fuck it, and that's it. And I'm just like, man, okay, yeah, absolutely.
Kind of
the attitude.
I've been taking lately too, because if you know how hard you practice, and I think you and I practice pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what you do to make sure your equipment's functional and all that stuff. You put everything you can into making the night go well. And if there's something that's just kind of out of your control, or it's just not your night, you could stew in it, which I used to do. But now I'm just like, you know what? I'm lucky to have these problems tonight. I'm lucky that I'm on tour and my amp sounds weird because the power at this venue sucks or whatever, or any number of things. And you're just like, whatever. Nobody out there cares.
You're right. I was
Yeah.
thinking that the whole time. Like nobody facing you towards the stage is knowing what's going on. They're just enjoying the music.
Exactly. So yeah, if you come into a problem, and we all take care of our gear pretty well, so that if there is an issue, it's usually not because of neglect or something. The problems I hate are the ones where I'm slapping myself on the forehead going, I could have prevented that, but I try hard not to have those happen. So if something happens, like I was in Germany in May with Sanhedrin, and we played this festival, and it was outdoors, and I had my guitars in my Enki case, and it was like 80 degrees, and the sun was on my Enki case the whole time. Well, what time are we playing? Like 6:37 when the sun's going down and the temperature's changing 20 degrees.
Yeah.
The first 3 songs, like I have to tune, like during the song I'm trying to tune, I'm going out of tune for like 3 songs straight until the guitar settles in. And I'm looking out at the crowd. They have no idea. I'm sure some of them are like, hey, that sounds off maybe, but they're all smiling and they like are singing songs. And then I'm just like, screw it. I'll get there eventually. I know it's not something I can really do anything about right now. I can't control the weather, So I just by the time we got to the 3rd song, my guitar was in tune and I settled in and everything was fine. But I just 10 years ago, that would have just crushed my soul. And now I'm like, I know what work I've put into making sure I'm secure with my abilities to a point. I'm always trying to get better, but I'm secure enough to know that if a guitar is out of tune, it's not because I'm stupid.
Right.
Now I know never to leave the black Enki case in the sun until right before.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing, festivals, it's like, man, being out in the outdoors and then every day the traveling, every day the different fests. It's just like, it's like, please get me through.
Yeah, you never know how you're going to sound outdoors. You're probably using rented backline, and all you can control is what you have with you and what you bring. So
I don't know how you all can do it when you're playing in the elements.
I've gotten sunburned playing out in the outdoor festivals, like
really?
to a crisp.
I've learned that the Boss TU2 display is not great in the sun. Like I go I'm like, oh no. I gotta put my foot over it to shade it. And then have you ever played in the rain?
Oh yeah,
like another festival on the same tour. Beautiful day, all day. Gladbeck, Germany.
Mud fest out there.
Until we start playing, it wasn't supposed to rain that day. It rains from the start of our set. As soon as we hit our last note, the rain stops.
Like, hey man, if they're still out there having fun, then
there were people out there, and you know what? When again, like it's raining and those people are standing there watching you, you're just like, I can't even be mad at this right now. Like if those people are out there in the rain, at least I have this canopy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like true. It was just, but again, those are the kinds of things that you remember, 10 years from now.
I've done it in the cold too. I've done festival out in the freezing cold. That was a
Yeah,
challenge.
playing
Years
guitar
ago.
in the cold is maybe one of my least favorite things to do in the world.
I can't even imagine.
Playing, or even venues where like you're the first band to play, as is often the case with my bands, and like the AC's been cranking all day, and it's still cold when you get on stage, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
just trying to work. Yeah,
Wake up. Yeah.
Pitchers
Yeah.
move.
Yeah, I don't know how y'all do it.
I
I watch guys that are playing out in the elements, number one, especially at a cold. I'm watching like I don't know how they do it with their hands and their fingers. Like you got to be freezing. And the other is when you're going, just knowing how, like when somebody picks up their guitar and they're like, it'll be like 30 degrees, 20 degrees outside, whatever. They're like, yeah, I'm gonna stop home, stop by the grocery store on the way home. I'm like, shit, they'll be back tomorrow with this guitar because I know it's gonna move around. So I don't.
yeah.
I think about you guys playing out. I'm like, how do you keep them in tune?
If you're lucky, you have
Oh yeah,
with
I use
the guitar you know. So,
Yeah. Well, what you do is you put Grovers on all your Les Pauls. That's my word to the wise.
right.
That speaking of that 56 reissue, if you want to talk a little shit about Gibson, here's your chance.
No, we don't try. It just happens.
The tuners on that guitar, I've had 4 warranty replacements on the Clouson tuners, and they all just keep having like all this give before they bite. So I'm at a point where I'm just going to put some Grovers on it and put
but that's your guitar, like you make it yours.
I have some nice guitars, but they're not like collectibles to me. They're just I try to get the best stuff I can afford that's within what I like. And unfortunately, I really like Les Pauls, which is
well, and that's probably because most of us, like my first guitar, the first electric guitar was a Les Paul knockoff. So, like, that's what we remember seeing all of our guitar heroes, like, in our generation. I'm a generation ahead of you, so. But that's what I remember everybody playing, so that's kind of my favorite guitar. It just sucks. Like, some of the shit that they do drives me crazy.
Sure. So, for the 5 that I have, 2 of them are Les Paul Studios, so they're just like working man's sort of level guitar. But they sound great, they play great, but they don't have all the fancy cosmetic appointments. And so those are the ones that go on the airplanes.
Right.
And then the other ones I have are custom shop ones, and those are just they're different. They're like another level up. So people are like, I hate Gibsons, because you can go to a guitar store and play 5 production Gibsons and find issues with 1 or 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And at the price, people get upset about that. But I always say, play it before you buy it if you can.
Yeah.
Like I said, I've ordered guitars online or off eBay, and they just don't stick around as long as the ones that I played in the store and was like, this is just, the 59 I got, the 59 reissue is like, I played it in the store. I was like, this is everything it's supposed to be. And then the price was right. And and my wife was like, you should get it. I was like, are you serious? I was more stressed about it than she was. And then like we're driving home, she's like, so how do you feel? How do you feel? I'm like, I feel
really?
Yeah.
Like
I feel like overjoyed and nauseous at the same time. Like, I know. That's what shopping's like.
That's hilarious. That's a good wife.
Yeah, well, she's in
Alex, wait a minute. Stop. Alex and I both have great wives. Let me just throw that out there.
Alex's wife, and that is 100% correct.
Yeah.
Glad to hear you're in the Good Wives Club.
Yeah, there you go. Well, had to put it on the record.
Yeah. So that's a story for its own day, I suppose, that the 59 acquisition. But again, I like those guitars where there's a story to it. Like this Les Paul Studio, which Alex knows well.
I know.
Nice.
$200, but like, look at it.
Look at that.
That stock's been drafted.
Yeah, the back neck is great. It's great neck.
Wow.
And just like it looks like it's been run over by a truck, because I bought it off of a guitar tech who had fixed it. He bought it off some lady who looked like she had run it over with a truck. So, but funnily enough, that $200 Les Paul, which has seen more miles and more stages and more people looking at it than any of my fancy ones, including my
Right.
white custom, because it's just like it's a workhorse, and that I think there's a lesson in that. Like just because you paid, $2,000 or $3,000 for a guitar doesn't in and of itself make it a good guitar.
Right.
No, yeah.
Experience in your hands will tell you what a good guitar is, because that's a $200
Yeah.
guitar, and every time I play it, I feel like I'm playing like Stevie Ray Vaughan's Strat, like how he must have felt.
Well,
with that number
Yeah.
Strat. It's like a party.
It's funny, like James Hetfield's out there playing again. He's got a couple, like three of
That
them, I
Electra,
think.
yeah,
Electros, Gibson copies from
yeah,
Japan made in the late 70s or whatever. And for him, he's like, I saw an interview. He said that that one he recorded a new record with that and his one ESP, and he
yeah.
said best sounding guitar I own. Guitar he
Exactly.
bought for $100. And
This thing sounds amazing. And it's a bit of a rough ride at this point because of the amount of playing that's been done to it over the years. But it's the rough ride that I'm familiar with. So if I give it to somebody else, they're going to be like, "Oh, this is,
yeah.
maybe
I
here."
guess
When I play it, I'm
I
like,
guess we'll-
"Yeah, I'm flying on that thing because it's
Yeah.
home for me."
Yeah.
yeah, it's home. It's home. It feels
Exactly.
like home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the white custom. I mean, listen, I play a lot of guitar. All my guitars have been played enough to feel like home at this point, luckily. But
Right.
yeah,
Now,
so
when you all are touring, and Jeremy, you kind of said it a couple of minutes ago, like if you're flying, you take certain guitars. Do you find, and this is coming out of a discussion I had with somebody yesterday, they were talking about when people are performing, they use their higher ends, and it was ESP LTD. It was a discussion about that. And they said, well, when they're touring, they need something that's going to last longer and do better. So they're using the ESPs rather than LTDs, or Gibson Epiphone, whatever. And you could interchange all that. Is that true? Like, when you go out on the road, do you all use different guitars than you would normally use, or different
well,
venues?
I kind of do the opposite. So, like I said, I have a couple really nice Les Pauls that honestly I can't afford to replace. Plus, I'm so
Right.
attached to them. And they go to the studio and they're on all the records because they
Yeah.
sound incredible. But when I'm on tour, I pack my Les Paul Studios, particularly when we're flying, because stuff gets lost. I had a
Yeah.
direct flight with Sanhedrin from JFK to Frankfurt. And I actually did bring my Les Paul Custom on that trip, but no more, and I'll tell you why. We get off the plane, and Erica's suitcase was missing from the direct flight. It wound up staying on that airplane and going to Singapore.
Oh,
So she didn't have her clothes with her for like the first 5 days of our tour. She was borrowing
great.
clothes. We have friends over there, so we had friends like coming by with like packs of underwear and stuff for her. But like, and she was borrowing clothes off of this one festival we were playing. Luckily, we were staying with this other band, Bloodstar, in the same hotel, and they have a female singer, and all their stuff fit. But that was when I was really like, okay, I brought the custom this time against I had to really talk myself into it. But I was like, it's a good tour. And once I got home, I was like, well, it made it back in one piece. Maybe it'll go in a trailer behind a van or whatever, but it's not going to go on an airplane anymore because
Right.
I would be so just devastated if that guitar disappeared. I mean, I would, in the grand scheme of, all things being a good life, I would survive. But like,
Right.
so when I go out now, it's with the stuff that I can't fathom. Like I'd be bummed if my $200 studio got stolen, but at least I
Yeah.
could afford another guitar in its range. Hopefully, if that were to
Mhm.
happen. So that's kind
Right.
of it. Plus and then the white guitar, the white custom, I'm just so attached to. That was my first guitar of like actual, high end
Right.
pieces where I
Right.
was like that was my only guitar that I had for years.
Right.
And like we've been through a lot together.
Yeah.
So
And I kind of figure, and Alex,
Yeah,
you and I have talked about that before.
I in that
What's that?
yeah, no, I was saying you were referencing about guitars. It's like for me, I have brought out the more expensive ones, which I do a lot. Because I may be playing that at the time and I'm just comfortable with
Right.
it. I'm just like fuck it, you know. But I think it's definitely best to bring out some of the low, as long as they can, like a player's guitar, like Jeremy was saying about
Yeah.
his studio guitars. It's like that works, and like I have the LTDs and those, always hold up real well.
And,
Right. Right.
and it
Rides
also,
and stuff.
yeah, I think the venues that you're playing make a difference too. Because like if we're playing
All right.
theaters where, like theaters, you typically have a whole off limits to the general population area where you can keep your stuff and keep
Right.
an eye on it.
Yeah,
But if you're in a club, you take your stuff off stage, and sometimes you're stashing it on the side of the wall where people are watching the show, and anybody
Right.
can just walk up and
yeah,
what they want. Or in the case of like a guitar amp, they'll be like, "Well, this this irreplaceable guitar amp to this guitar player seems like a fine place to set my open beer." Like, come
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So it all depends. Like, yeah, the Friedman comes out for the big time shows, but like I play the Ampeg, which I still love anyway for touring and all that stuff, for example.
Right.
But
Right.
I half the time when you're going to Europe and stuff like that, you're renting gear anyway. So it's like you just kind of get
Yeah.
used to adapting with whatever it is.
Well, Alex, I have to get a jab in. I mean, at least y'all own your own guitars. I know somebody that doesn't own his own bass, apparently.
Oh wow.
I'll have to tell you what I have. Turn them.
We'll,
That's just me
we'll
being
tell that story
shitty to
off.
somebody here in town that was an asshole to me.
Ah.
I'll tell you
You
the
make
story.
no
Remind me
money.
after I hit the record.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That sounds
Hey,
fun.
hey, look, I have an excuse. I used to be a firefighter. We talk shit. And that,
Yeah,
that guy
yeah.
was shitty to me, and I'll talk
Well,
shit.
Roger, where are you located?
I'm in the same county. We're just south of DC.
Okay,
I'm
so
a few
you're an
miles.
East Coast guy.
Excuse me?
You're an East Coast guy.
Yes. Yep.
All right, so we all talk shit. It's like how you
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
tell people you love them is you insult them.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
I learned when I moved to California for like a year and a half, a few years back, and I learned that like having like the East Coast sarcasm would
Yeah.
not land
It does. Yeah, it does.
in ways that could be very awkward. Same with Germany sometimes. Because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
seem to have a very literal sort of way of speaking with each other, I guess, and with us sometimes. And yeah, so sometimes I've said something sarcastically and then get that look of like, what did you just say to me? And I'm like, oh, I was joking.
Uh-oh. It's like, let me fill out the hurtful feelings form.
Yeah.
All right, let's not go there. They don't understand my sense of humor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Like,
So
"Oh,
what
And
are
that's
your
all it is.
favorite pickups?
huh?
Favorite pickups?
Favorite pickups? Well, Jesus, now we got a new rabbit hole. So
Oh, well, that's why I didn't join in on I cannot do amps and all that shit because I'm in a in a guitar rabbit hole. I wind pickups. Try that.
oh wow, jeez. Don't give me any ideas. So I guess in general, I like sort of like a medium hot Alnico 5 sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So in my custom, I have the 498T, and then in the Jackson, I put in the custom 5, which is similar. I
Right.
got DiMarzio Tone Zone in the black studio. But when I got my 59 reissue, I really started to understand the appeal of a lower output humbucker and what
Right.
it does that's different than the hotter ones. And so, but for live, I like a sort of that medium hot thing to just hit the amp a certain way.
Right.
But yeah, in the studio, all bets are off. In the studio, it's
Yeah.
like the ears win. I could be playing a Squire, Jaguar on a part, and if it's the right sound, then I don't care.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of loud stuff, I like that medium hot, like not quite a JB
Mm-hmm.
of heat, but like Alnico pickups for sure. I don't
Right.
love
Right.
ceramic pickups. They're a little kind of harsh to my ears. I like something that has like a sweetness when you hit a G chord. even if you
Yeah.
have a lot of gain going on, you know.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah,
that's my
really.
vibe.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
neck pickups, I just like a big woofy thing that still has that pick articulation. In fact, I
Yeah.
have a Duncan Seth Lover in both those guitars in the neck, and then I have a
Oh,
coil
yeah.
tap on one of them because I just like that neck pickup Strat sound, but I
Yeah.
don't Strat, so that's how I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Nice.
Yeah.
I found out that, live and in the studio, it's just like there's certain
Oh,
things that just work live, and then there's certain rigs that's just like in the studio, it's a whole different animal.
it
Right?
really
Like
is.
talked earlier about miking and things like that. It's just
Yeah,
there's just animals there.
and also like I don't know about you, Alex, but I like to track in the control room and not in the live room where the amp is, and that in
Oh
and of
yeah,
itself is very exposing.
yeah. Yeah,
And
I prefer like that whole thing in the studio, like compared to like being at home and tracking, but sometimes, it is what it is. But yeah,
but
I think you work better, like your work ethic is better too, It's like,
yeah, but I mean, as opposed to standing in the live room in front of your cabinets with all the volume coming at you, like I like to be able to hear what the person hearing the record is going to hear when I'm tracking. But what I've
yeah,
learned, especially through the demoing process, is like there are certain riffs that when you're playing them at rehearsal, you can kind of play with a little bit of reckless abandon. And then when you get into a studio environment where everything's very forensic, you're like, you have to play softer in this riff, or you have to hit the string a
yeah,
certain way at a different angle because of, again, you're trying to get what's in your brain to come out of whatever speaker you're in front of. And so yeah, that whole thing is its own wormhole that I'm recently out of. Like when I demoed the new Sanhedrin record at home, I took every verse and chorus of every song and I played them with all four guitars I was going to use on the record, and then I would mix and match them until I found the combination that kind of exploded. And I didn't have I didn't let myself have a bias because it was like they're all going to sound good, but which one sounds the most alive? And I was surprised sometimes at the results.
Yeah.
But
So
but that
what's the songwriting process for you guys too? Like three of you guys, how does that
um,
work?
it typically starts with guitar riffs that all just sort of work together. And sometimes I'll have it in my head. I think this is a verse and I think this is a chorus. And then, but I generally don't let it get too far before I get in a room with those two because Erica will hear things melodically that maybe I wasn't anticipating. And she'll be like, actually, that's the chorus. What you think is the verse to me. And I'm like, okay, let's roll with that. And then
Mhm.
I also don't tell Nate what I'm hearing in my head for a drum beat most of the time. Most of the time, he anticipates it, but every once in a while, he'll play something that's either half or double or different, and I'll be
Hmm.
like, "Oh," because I want that. We're very collaborative. It
Yeah.
usually
Hmm.
starts with guitar riffs, but it doesn't. I don't let it get too far. I mean, every once in a while, I'll bring in a completed song where I'm like, "Guys, this is it. Please, like, I just can't change this." And you know, there's a couple songs like that, but for the most part, it's very collaborative. And sometimes Erica will come in with a progression on bass where it's just a bass line. And that's a lot of
Hmm.
fun as a guitar player because it's a whole different approach. Like
Sure. Yeah.
I'm getting root notes and now I have to figure out how I want to chord over them or what kind of vibe I
Hmm.
want to do, because with just a bass line, I could follow her root notes or I could go off on some tangent because I'm writing
Hmm.
it. You write your own riff yourself. You're the root keeper of the root note most of the time too. But when she comes in with some
You're
rhythm,
one guitar too. You guys are
yeah,
a three-piece, so that's a whole other thing too, I think, which is cool because,
right,
I've always mainly played with two guitar attack in bands,
uh-huh.
and only a few times have I done the three-piece thing, and for me it was actually really cool because it just gave me a lot more room to do other things as a guitar player.
Yeah,
And then you could aim for being the two guitar
exactly.
too, but it's
They
but it's a
they both have their limitations, but they also because of the limitations of any kind, whether your limitations as a player, for example, even any kind of situation where you put yourself with limitations, you actually open up creativity on the other side of that, I find. So
Mhm.
being the only
Yeah.
guitar player in Sanhedrin, I have to write my riffs so that when we play them live, it fills up all the space. So that's going to affect my choice of chords, uh, my choice of, strumming patterns, and then, yeah, my choice of tones. Sometimes if I'm playing a solo, you can be assured that there's a delay on because I need to fill more space in
Oh
the
yeah.
background. And I have to select. I was using a tube screamer for a while for leads, but those have that kind of low frequency cut to them. And so I would
Mhm.
put that on, and then we'd lose bottom end. So I had to find a different overdrive pedal that had a more full frequency spectrum. And you just kind of never stop, as you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
I
the
think
challenge is there, but I like playing with two guitars too because I like those, Iron Maiden Thin Lizzy harmonies and the
yeah,
texture.
yeah.
So,
Uh,
but
yeah.
yeah, they each, as you know, they have their advantages and their drawbacks creatively. Not so much.
Mhm.
And in
I think
Sanhedrin,
it's
we always
cool.
more people, more
It's
problems.
cool you said about your drummer as well, like you said,
Yeah,
and most of the time, I don't tell him what I'm thinking, and which I think is great because to me is when you got a great drummer, when you really don't have to tell them and they know how to serve the song. It's not about
Yeah.
like, "Oh, what
yeah,
craziness I can throw in here," and, it's more about, "Hey, how can I make this song sound get the message across properly,
right.
for this and serve the song and know, that whole piece of music and how things are supposed to sound.
Yeah, in
But
the
It
case
sounds
of
like it would give it a different perspective and a different level of creativity, right?
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, things that you would not think of, like you were saying,
right.
like about,
And
oh, well, they this, and I'm like, oh,
in the
all right,
case
yeah,
of in the case of Nate and I, having been playing together for as long as we have, 18 years now, we
hmm
sort of already know what we want to hear from each other. And the
Mhm.
songwriting style that we both apply to one another revolves around that relationship. And we have developed our own pocket, much the same way like a bassist and a drummer who've been playing together a long time might have the same thing. So yeah, and one thing that being the only guitar player does for me has done for me is it's made me better because I have
Mhm.
to really
yeah,
nail every single strum, every single note, because if
yeah,
I don't have somebody else there playing the same thing to back me up. So it's made
sure,
my ability to balance the performance and the emotional side of playing with, still keeping that other side of the brain focused on the fact that I want maximum impact coming out of the speakers at all
Right,
times.
right.
hmm
But that's been
Now,
really good for me. Yeah.
yeah,
when you all, and I may have asked somebody else this question. I know I've asked you, Alex. When you all go in and you're starting to write songs, is there like a theme? Like we're gonna write about this. How do the words and the music kind of meet?
Well, in Sanhedrin, it's typically usually we come up with the structure of the song and decide what the verses and the choruses are.
Right.
And in our case, Erica is the primary lyricist. And so she'll come in with some themes. I want to write a song about this. And sometimes, if it's early enough in the process, the themes of the song may affect musical choices that I make as a guitar player. Like,
Oh yeah.
you might say, well, this is like a kind of we have a song called The Poisoner, which is like a desolate post-apocalyptic sort of lyrical theme.
Hmm.
And so I purposely, with parts of particularly the clean guitars, made everything very sparse and lonesome and cinematic sounding to try to
Right.
match the vibe of the lyrics. And when you can nail all that stuff at once is
Yeah.
like really cool. But yeah, in
Right.
our case, typically it starts with the music and then the melody and then the lyrical themes kind of come later in the process. And from time to time,
Right.
she'll ask for our help on writing lyrics. For the first time ever, there's a song on this new record where I wrote a whole verse. She wrote the first verse, and it's got this cool phonetic thing going on. She's like, but I don't know what to do for a second verse. I'm like, I got it. And so then I went home and sent her off lyrics for the second verse. And yeah, there's no egos when it comes to who contributes what.
Right.
Luckily.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's what it's about right there.
Yeah.
And I think the best bands too is usually it's a group of people working together and working off each other and being inspired by each other. And like you said, no egos, like, oh, it's got to be me writing this or whatever. It's just like, like if any of my other projects, somebody comes up with something great, I encourage them. Yeah, man, keep it
Good.
going.
It's great, man.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I actually wanted to ask you about how the deal with Metal Blade came along, and it's funny how you were bringing up like certain stuff. It's like when you're a kid, and it's like, for me, like Metal Blade Records was a big deal in the '80s. Like whether it was like Slayer or Trouble or whatever. Some of the bands that I listened to.
Yeah.
So it's gotta be pretty cool. You're like, I'm on this label that put out all this classic inspirational stuff that changed music, really.
Yeah. Well, being on the label has, changed not our approach creatively, but it's certainly given us a sense that like what we're doing is maybe more important to other people than we initially may have thought it would have been. But how that came about is actually cool, and it involves a full circle moment. So through Black Anvil, I met a guy named Johan Prenger who lives in Netherlands, and he actually released the first Black Anvil record before I joined the band on his independent label before the band got picked up by Relapse. So fast forward to 2019, I'm on tour with Sanhedrin and we're playing in Tilburg, and he came out to the show. And when we got done playing, he was just like really complimentary of the band. And he said specifically, you know me well enough to know that I don't bullshit you. If I thought you guys sucked, I would tell you, which I was like, I appreciate that. But he's like, you guys are great. You guys should get on a bigger label. And I was thinking like, oh, okay. Like nobody had ever really presented that idea. We were quite content with the label we were on, Cruz del Sur Music, because the guy who runs that is just a dear friend of us now. And then I was dealing with Metal Blade through this reissue label I was managing a few years back around the same time. And I had a contact of this fella named Ula, who also had a relationship. He was the guy he was like the middle person between me and the label to negotiate the licenses for these reissues I was doing. And so I hit him up because he's friends with Johan. And I say, Johan says, we should try to get on a bigger label. What do you think the chances are of, do you think that's a reasonable thing to strive for with us where we're at right now? Because, I'd like to pick people's brains who work in the business like that. And he's like, yeah, and I might know a few different labels I could talk to for you. So he got us started with the conversation with Metal Blade. And that's how we landed there. It was really the encouragement of friends who were friends with other people who could, get our foot in the door to a conversation. The full circle moment is now Johan, who said that to us after seeing us, is also a painter. And for this upcoming record, he will be painting the record cover. He's already painted it, and it's stupendous.
Ah, wow, that's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so like those are the things. It's like that's why we do this stuff, man. It's like those relationships and those moments where you can share stuff with your circle of friends and have these moments where like you can do stuff like that. It's so everything builds everything else. That's what I've learned. If it weren't for Black Anvil, Sanhedrin may not have gotten a foot in the door here and there in terms of, oh, you're in that band, that's how I know you. I know you're an actual musician who's got touring experience, yada yada.
It's all part of the story, a part of the journey, all these different things and things that we do that takes us, in a different direction or whatever. And same thing with me, all the different bands that I played with in the past, and so it shapes you, I think.
Yeah, and the longer I go, the more I've just learned. There's so much to be grateful for with it all. And one of the things I've also learned from being out on the road with bands like yourself, or a lot of bands that have been doing it even longer than me, is the bands with the most success and the most friends in the business are the ones where there is just the ego is left at the door. It's like
Yeah.
we're all the 14-year-old kid that just loves sick music still.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact that we're doing it still at this point in our lives, if you'd have told that 14-year-old kid that back then, he would have been like, get out of here. So the fact that
Yeah.
we're also able to do this in any capacity and that anybody cares, it's just like what a thing to be grateful for, you know?
Yeah.
You have
And we're all
there,
those kids. It's like even like on the last tour I did with Jeremy with with Cannibal and Dark Funeral, um, we were all just like goofing off all the bands, at night and just telling funny stories and just fucking around with each other and just having fun,
It's just
and it
easy.
was camaraderie, on that
Yeah.
tour,
Well, we've
without a
all been
doubt.
on I'm sure you've been on tours where there's a difficult band
Yeah,
and
sure.
it makes I can name one or two.
We'll leave them
And
out.
yeah, I won't name them, but like I'll say that the difference like it can make a difference because it's a grind. Where you're traveling. Nobody wants to sit in a van for 10 hours a day. You know,
Yeah.
like that's not why we do it. So like when you get to the show and all the other bands are cordial and cool and you become good friends with some of them, like that's where the that's what keeps us it's what keeps us going, I guess. I would say at this point. Why else are we doing it?
you
Yeah.
should get a side gig in doing like motivational speaking and like leadership and wisdom.
Well, that's very kind of you. But
No, seriously, like
enough gigs that don't pay very well.
Yeah.
So,
no, I mean I'm hoping like younger guys are watching this, guys and girls that are in bands and just listening to some of the I guess wisdom from you two that you all give out, some of the advice and the wisdom and shit you all have seen and experienced. Like what you just said was phenomenal. I hope they're watching that and paying attention.
yeah, I mean, it's a long, hard road to get to that point. I think if you talk to me in my 20s, maybe I wouldn't sound so grateful
Yep.
or whatever. But I spent my 20s trying to get to a point where I could spend my 30s on tour. Like, and so it
Yeah.
came later for me than a lot of people,
Yeah.
but it's just something I always wanted to do. But then once you get it, you experience all this great stuff. You're like, I mean, I still complain. You can ask anybody who lives with me. But like when it comes to the big picture of the stuff we've gotten to experience so far, it's like, like it's pretty wild. I'm from a real small town too. Like there's no example. I didn't have an example of how to do this like you would if you live in a city where there's like a bigger
Right.
scene. And so that helps me too. I'm just like, you know, there's nothing to be arrogant about with this stuff. It's all just appreciating everything that as it comes. Sometimes you have to appreciate some stuff after because while you're going through it, it kind of sucks. But then you
Yeah.
laugh about it later, right? So
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess getting to that, what do you got coming up next? What's new record maybe, and some tours or
yeah.
what?
Well, I guess maybe the cat's out of the bag, but I'm no longer in Black Anvil. So anybody who's expecting to see me on their upcoming tour with Abath, I encourage you to support them. But I won't be
Mhm.
seeing you out there. We had a mutual sort of departure, but we remain great friends, and
Mhm.
I'll always be grateful to them. It's all good vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's that. Get that out of the way. So that's one less
Mhm.
band to keep me a little less busy. So in the meantime, Sanhedrin's just working on this next record. We're hoping to get it out. We're going to have everything submitted for a fall release, but we're going to wait until we can line up a good European tour before we actually release it. Because, like we were saying earlier, the tour and the record promotional cycles kind of feed each other. So if you have a record out, you're getting all this PR from that. And then in that PR, they're saying, catch them on tour. And then you got tour PR releases that say, hey, catch their new record. So that's how we're going to do it. And we don't know when we're going to release it. But and in the meantime, I started a YouTube channel called North Country Riffworks, where I'm just doing gear demos of stuff. I've just kind of contributing to the same community I've been taking from in terms of knowledge. Like we always go on YouTube and want to hear what this sounds like in this guitar and this and that and the other. So I'm just kind of adding myself as a resource. Like the other day, I put that video up of me playing a Jackson with this pickup that doesn't come in a Jackson Rose if you buy it stock. So maybe you want to know what that sounds like if you have one. I've done a couple of videos of the new Genome software and some Strat pickups thing. And I'm just looking around my studio and doing stuff as I come up with it. Be like, oh, maybe this could be of use to somebody. So that's something I'm kind of working on with the time I have between now and whenever Sanhedrin gets me out of the house again. We are playing a festival in the fall called Blades of Steel in Madison, Wisconsin. And we're going to probably do some tour dates around that. But other than that, not a lot going on. It's kind of the calm before the storm. We're working on the record and making sure that's as good as it can be. And then once that's done, we can really hit the nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex? When are you going back on the road? I missed your last tour because I was on tour. So
I'm out summertime. We got the festivals in Europe, and that's July, I think. And then we do have a tour booked. It hasn't been announced yet. It's a big tour. It's a really good one. It's gonna be, I can't say. So but we have a new record in the works already.
Nice.
Bob sent me some stuff years ago, and I don't remember. And he was like, "I want to use this, and this. And did you use this for anything?" I'm like, "Nope." Okay. So new record in the works. And my band Shadows, that's a whole other story, but re-recording that album, which is fun. Re-recording, the whole album. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I
got new Ruins record. But I got stuff going on. So.
Yeah, good.
But mainly I'm home for the.
Yeah, well, you got a beautiful baby there to keep you busy and a beautiful wife.
Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you.
You're living the dream like we all are.
Yeah, well, we like to tell ourselves that every day on tour, especially when worse things were like living the dream. That's the joke, It's just here we are, waiting for 6 hours in some miserable place.
I heard somebody on our last tour, I won't name them because they're a great person. I don't want to have people think they're not. But somebody's walking through the venue and they go, "Living the dream," and then somebody else goes, "Yep, somebody else's."
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah,
that's good.
So that's something I've used here and there. But ultimately, look, I own. When I was a kid looking at the Musician's Friend catalog at all the pretty guitars, I never thought I'd own this many of them. So,
sure, yeah. I say that every night I come downstairs.
What is that? 1/10 collection behind you?
What's that?
Is that 1/10 of your collection behind you? I know you got.
Yeah.
You keeping Roger in business by yourself, probably.
We won't put the rest of them, but yeah. And some other places too.
Well, and see, I only have 2.
Oh, he's got one. You got one of my guitars at your house too.
Oh yeah, the V. Yeah.
No.
You just pointed out that I was friggin' lying because I said I only have 2 guitars. You just pointed out one that's not in view.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
Well, it's his guitar, right? The other one.
Yeah. Well, he owns one of my older guitars, a custom V that I had.
Okay.
We're going to rework actually an ESP, my old 80s ESP Maverick to Strat Maple Neck. So we're going to redo that one.
That's going to be on a show in the near future where we're going to kind of redo that thing, do some upgrades on it.
If you want one of our eventually we plan on having some like discussion panels and stuff like that. Cool. So we'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, dude, anytime. Like I was telling you before when we were talking about doing this, I was like, cool, we're just gonna do what we always do, but we'll
it's just like it's me and Jeremy
right
now.
Ross and Bob and Paul are just
like, that's kind of what we were.
Yeah.
We were looking for it to not necessarily be an interview-based program, but just kind of bullshitting. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm fortunate enough I get to sit here and watch everybody bullshit, and then I get to watch it first
Right.
and kind of like throw in my little
Yeah.
snarky comments once in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
Poo
Well, I
poo.
guess we'll end it here, and I just want to thank you once again, Jeremy, for coming on, buddy.
Absolutely.
It's my pleasure.
All
man.
right.
I was looking forward to
You know,
this. It's nice to hang with
yeah,
you
yeah,
outside of
yeah,
on tour. It's just good to see you again. So
yeah. Fuck yeah, man. And we got to continue this stuff, and
yeah.
look forward to a new Sanhedrin record eventually, and
Yes, sir.
that on tour, and they're an amazing
His
band.
YouTube
Since
channel.
I heard the band that Jeremy gave me their first record years ago
Yep.
on tour, and I was like, wow, this is up my alley, because that's my roots is in
Yeah,
the
well,
heavy rock.
You were wearing
stuff,
some cool. You were wearing some cool T-shirts, and I was like, this guy might like what we're doing. So
Yeah. And he was sitting there playing like Thin Lizzy licks during sound check, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
or Scorpion. I'm like, oh, this guy's all right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Honest stuff.
So cool, man. But